February 16th, 1943, 11:59 p.m. Somewhere over the frozen hell of Norway's Hardangervidda Plateau. The roar of the Halifax bomber's engines is a physical force, vibrating through the ribcage of the 6 men hunched in its belly. They are shadows in the red gloom, faces smeared with soot and cocoa-based camouflage grease that smells of earth and fear. Beneath them, through a hole in the floor that screams with Arctic wind, is nothing but a rolling ocean of darkness, a lunar landscape of ice, rock, and snowdrifts deep enough to swallow a house. Knut Haukelid, a young man with the eyes of an old hunter, checks his static line for the 10th time. The plane lurches in a pocket of turbulence. He doesn't flinch. His mind isn't here, in this trembling metal shell. It's already on the ground. It's already at the target. The Vemork hydroelectric plant, clinging to a sheer cliff in the distant valley of Ryukon. Inside that fortress of concrete and German guards is the prize, the sole reason for this suicidal mission: heavy water. You've never heard of it, neither had most of the world. But in Berlin, in 1943, physicists whisper that it is the key, the crucial moderator that can slow a nuclear chain reaction, transforming laboratory theory into a working atomic reactor, into a bomb. The entire Nazi nuclear program hinges on the trickle of heavy water produced at Vemork. And that trickle must be stopped. The jump light flickers from red to a sickly, pulsating green. Go. One by one, they vanish into the abyss. The shock of the -30°C air steals the breath from their lungs. They are puppets in the slipstream. Then, with a violent jerk, the parachutes bloom. Silence, sudden and profound, broken only by the howl of the wind in the risers. Then, impact. Not a soft drift into powder, but a brutal, bone-jarring crash through a wind-hardened crust of snow. Haukelid lies still for a moment, untangling himself, tasting the cold metal of his Schmeisser submachine gun. He looks up. The Halifax is already a receding drone. They are alone. This is Operation Gunnerside. Not an invasion force, but a scalpel. 9 men, 6 just arrived, 3 from a failed earlier attempt who survived a winter of starvation on the plateau against the might of the Third Reich's most guarded secret. They bury their chutes, they inventory their gear, plastic explosives, primer cord, Tommy guns, a pair of deadly effective bolt cutters, and a 2-man polk, a rescue sled repurposed to carry the tools of destruction. For 5 days they will ski, not for sport, but for survival and stealth, moving only in the perpetual twilight of the Arctic winter, navigating by map and desperate instinct. The Hardangervidda is a beautiful killer. It offers no cover. A single patrol plane, a single German ski patrol, and the mission ends in a firefight on the open snow. But Haukelid knows this land. He feels its rhythms. He leads them down from the killing plateau into the steep forested valleys leading to Ryukon. Their breath freezes on their wool balaclavas. Their skis whisper over the snow, a sound they pray is lost in the wind. They are ghosts. They must be. Because waiting for them at Vemork is not just a factory, but a myth of impregnability. Guarded by over 300 German troops, surrounded by minefields, searchlights, and a cable car that is the only access road, cut into a cliff face above a roaring river. The previous British attempt to drop a larger force directly onto the plant ended in disaster, capture, execution, or death in the frozen wilderness. Gunnerside is different. It is a heist. And as they finally look down from a snow-covered ridge, seeing the plant's lights glinting far below like a dragon's hoard, Knut Haukelid knows they have one advantage the Germans never considered. The Germans fortified every road, every bridge, every possible approach. They never thought to guard the river itself. February 27th, 1943, 10 p.m. the edge of the abyss. From their hide, the Vermont plant is a diorama of terrible beauty. A monolithic concrete slab grafted onto the mountain's raw face, its windows glowing with a warm, deceptive light. The Mona River, a black serpent of churning, ice-flecked water, thunders through the gorge 500 feet below. The only bridge is a steel and concrete sentinel, bathed in the harsh white of floodlights, with a machine gun nest at its midpoint. The saboteurs watch, studying the patterns. Searchlights sweep in slow, predictable arcs. Patrols change at precise intervals. The Germans are disciplined, thorough, and utterly blind to what is about to happen. Because Knut Haukelid isn't looking at the bridge, he's looking at the gorge. The sheer, frozen, near-vertical rock wall that plunges from the railway line down to the river's edge, an approach deemed impossible by the plant's architects and its defenders. No ropes could reach, no man could climb it, especially not in winter. But they don't need to climb down, they need to get across. Their plan hinges on a single, insane gambit: descend to the river, ford its freezing torrent, and climb the opposite bank to the plant's railway gate. The descent is the first impossibility, until Joachim Ranneberg, the 23-year-old mission commander, points to a set of railway tracks that run along the lip of the gorge, servicing the plant. Just beyond the fence, the tracks curve and the ground falls away beneath them into darkness. "We go down there," Ranneberg says, his voice barely a whisper against the river's roar. They wait for the searchlight to pass. Then, in a breathless sprint of shadows, they cross the open snow to the railway line. They lie flat between the rails, hearts hammering against the cold steel. The light sweeps back, passes over them. They are unseen. Now for the descent. They crawl to the edge. Below is pure blackness. Using the railway support girders as anchors, they begin to lower themselves, hand over hand, into the void. The wind funnels up the gorge, biting through their uniforms. Ice coats the metal. One slip, one lost grip, and it's a long, silent fall into the rocks. You can almost feel the burning strain in their shoulders, the terrifying emptiness beneath their boots as they search for purchase on the slick rock face. They don't climb all the way down. They reach a narrow, icy ledge. Below, the Mona River rages, a deafening roar of white water and grinding ice. This is the second impossibility, the crossing. They strip to their wool underwear, stuffing their uniforms, weapons, and explosives into rubber kit bags. The cold is a physical assault, stealing the air from their lungs. Numbed, trembling, they link arms, forming a human chain, and step into the torrent. The shock is electric, paralyzing. The current is a living thing, trying to tear their legs out from under them, to pull them into the dark and drown them. Each step is a battle against nature's raw force. Ice chunks slam into their thighs. The water's so cold it feels like fire. For 3 minutes that stretch into an eternity, they fight their way across, emerging on the far bank as hypothermic, shuddering wrecks. They can't speak, their fingers are useless claws, but they are across. Somehow they dress, somehow their hands, warmed by sheer will, assemble their weapons. The climb up the far bank is a blur of agony, and then they are there, a silent, dripping phantom at the base of the plant's perimeter fence. They cut through the wire. It is midnight. They are inside the dragon's lair. They split. The demolition team, led by Ranneberg and including Haukelid, moves toward the heavy water concentration room. The cover team takes position, their Tommy guns pointed at the barracks where hundreds of German soldiers sleep. A single cough, a dropped tool, a guard deciding to take an unscheduled stroll, and it all ends. Ranneberg eases open the heavy door to the basement room. It's unlocked. Why lock a door inside a fortress? Before them stand 18 cylindrical cells, each filled with the precious, deadly heavy water. The air hums with machinery. This is it, the moment upon which the balance of the war, perhaps of the century, teeters. They lay the charges. The plastic explosive is malleable, like putty. They shape it carefully around the cell's base. Primer cord is threaded, connected to 2 separate fuses, a 30-second fuse for escape and a 2-minute backup. They work with a calm, terrifying efficiency. A sound. Footsteps on the stairs. A lone Norwegian night watchman, a civilian, stops dead in the doorway, his eyes wide with disbelief. He sees armed men in British uniforms, wires, blocks of explosives. He opens his mouth to shout. Knut Haukelid raises his finger to his lips. His eyes lock with the watchman's. It's not a threat. It's a plea, a shared understanding. For Norway. The watchman, after a heartbeat that lasts a lifetime, gives an almost imperceptible nod. He turns around. He walks back up the stairs. He sees nothing. The fuses are lit. The saboteurs melt back into the night, retracing their impossible path. They are halfway across the river when the world behind them tears itself apart. Not a fiery Hollywood explosion, but a deep, contained crumph that echoes up the gorge. A geyser of glass, metal, and 1,100 pounds of irreplaceable heavy water erupts from the cellar windows. The destruction is perfect. The cells are shattered. The product is draining into the Norwegian soil. The Germans wake to chaos and confusion. Alarms scream. But the saboteurs are already gone, vanishing back into the mountains from which they came, leaving behind only frozen footprints in the river shallows, and a mystery. How did they get in? The mission is a flawless success, but for Knut Haukelid, the war is not over. It is about to enter a new, even more dangerous phase. Because Berlin is furious, and they issue a command. Salvage every remaining kilogram of heavy water at Vemork and ship it all, now, to Germany. The race for the atomic bomb has just entered its final, desperate lap. March 1943 to November 1943. The Plateau in London. For Knut Haukelid and a gunnerside team, the aftermath of the Vemork raid was a new kind of war. The open battle was over. The clandestine struggle began. While Ronneberg and others skied the punishing 250-mile escape route to neutral Sweden, Haukelid and several others melted back into the Norwegian wilderness. Their new orders were to stay, to organize, to become the enduring thorn in the side of the German occupation in Telemark. From hideouts high on the Hardangervidda, they watched as the German response unfolded. A massive, furious search involving thousands of soldiers. The Nazis scoured the mountains, but the saboteurs, moving like ghosts through terrain they knew as their own backyard, remained uncaptured. The victory, however, began to taste of ashes. Intelligence trickled in from contacts in Rügen. The Germans were not giving up. In fact, they were rebuilding. Using forced labor, they repaired the bomb-shattered concentration cells. The hum of electrolysis, that dreadful sound, started again in the basement of Vemork within months. The willpower of the Reich was being measured in kilograms of heavy water, and Berlin had decided the price was worth paying. In London, the news caused a profound strategic crisis. Professor Leif Tronstad, the architect of gunnerside, had always vehemently opposed aerial bombing. He knew the heavy water cells were buried under layers of concrete and that the plant sat above massive liquid ammonia tanks. A bombing raid would risk a catastrophic release of poison gas over the town of Rügen, with unthinkable civilian casualties. But with the plant resurrected and producing again, the American military command lost patience with delicate special operations. The calculus of war shifted. On the morning of November 16, 1943, that calculus fell from the sky. The people of Ryukyu heard the drone first, a deep, apocalyptic hum that grew until it filled the valley. Then, the sight. 140 American B-17 flying fortresses, their silver bodies glinting in the cold light, filled the sky. For the commanders in Washington, it was a simple equation: destroy the target at any cost. What followed was not a surgical strike, but a storm of high explosives. Over 700 bombs rained down on the Vemork plant and the surrounding area. The ground shook continuously, concrete shattered, steel twisted, and fires erupted. But the fortified heavy water facility, built into the mountain, proved resilient. Only a fraction of the bombs found their intended mark.
The true cost was tallied not in machinery, but in lives. A direct hit on a civilian air raid shelter killed 22 Norwegians, men, women, and children. It was a devastating blow to the local population and a moral wound for the resistance. The bombing achieved its primary objective. It convinced the Germans that Vemork was no longer tenable. They ordered a complete shutdown. But in London and in Haukelid's mountain camp, there was no celebration, only a grim realization. The Germans weren't abandoning their prize, they were moving it. A new, urgent intelligence packet reached Haukelid. The entire remaining stockpile of heavy water, every last precious liter produced at Vemork, was being prepared for shipment to Germany. Barrels were being crated, loaded onto rail cars. The final destination, the research laboratories of the Uranverein, the Nazi uranium club. The war's greatest scientific prize was rolling out of the mountains, and with it, the last best chance to stop the German atomic dream. Haukelid studied the transport route. The barrels would go by train from Ryukyu to the shore of Lake Tinsho. There, they would be loaded onto the railway ferry, the SF Hydro. The ferry would make the 2-hour crossing to Mael, where the cargo would continue its journey by train to the North Sea port, and then on to Germany. Every leg of this journey was heavily guarded, except one: the Hydro itself. The ferry, a workaday vessel that had chugged across the deep, dark waters of Lake Tinsho for decades, was the weakest link. It sat unguarded at the quay the night before its voyage. The Germans, in their focus on the cargo, had overlooked the vessel that would carry it. They saw a ferry. Knut Haukelid saw a coffin. Orders crackled over the clandestine radio from London: stop the transport by any means necessary. There would be no second chances. If that ferry sailed with its cargo intact, the heavy water would vanish into the heart of the Third Reich. Haukelid, now the on-the-ground commander, assembled a new team: Rolf Sorley and Knut Lear Hansen. Their task was monstrously simple and complex. They had to design a bomb. Not one to destroy a fortified factory, but one to sink a ship in deep water, ensuring its cargo was lost forever. It had to be small, powerful, reliable, and critically, it had to be timed. The fate of the atomic race now hinged on a homemade timepiece, a few pounds of plastic explosive, and the courage of 3 men standing on a deserted dock in the freezing Norwegian night.
February 19th, 1944, 11:30 p.m. The docks of Tinsho. The night is a perfect ink-black ally. A dense fog coils up from the icy black waters of Lake Tinsho, swallowing sound and shape. Knut Haukelid, Rolf Sorley, and Knut Lear Hansen are motionless in the shadows of a warehouse, watching the SF Hydro. She is an old, boxy vessel, a railway ferry built for utility, not grace. Her critical feature is her main deck, a set of railway tracks running its length, allowing entire freight cars to roll on in Ryukyu and roll off in Mael. Tonight, those tracks hold a single unmarked freight car under a tarpaulin. Inside are 39 steel drums containing 1,100 gallons of the most valuable liquid on Earth. The guards have done their rounds.
The sentry, a single German soldier, stamps his feet against the cold at the head of the gangway, his attention turned inward. He is guarding the cargo, not the ship. It is the final, fatal flaw in their logic. Haukelid gives a nod. He and Lear Hansen move. They are not commandos now, but dock workers in heavy coats and caps, their faces obscured. They carry a simple, innocuous toolbox. If challenged, their story is rehearsed. They are mechanics sent for a last-minute check on the locomotive couplings. They walk with the weary, unhurried pace of men on a late shift. The sentry barely glances at them as they cross the gangway onto the hydro's aft deck. The fog does the rest, wrapping them in a private world of muffled lapping water and the creak of cold metal. Their target is the bilge, the lowest, wettest part of the ship, where seawater naturally collects and is pumped out. It is the vessel's vulnerable point. If they can blow a hole in the hull there, the inrushing lake water will be unstoppable. The ferry will go down in deep, unrecoverable waters, over 1,400 feet deep in the middle of Tinshow. But first, they must get to it. They find a hatch leading below decks. It groans in protest as they lift it. The sound is deafening in the silence. They freeze, listening. Only the distant cough of the sentry. They descend into the bowels of the ship. The air below is thick with the smell of damp wood, oil, and rust. They light a single shielded flashlight. The beam cuts through the darkness, revealing a labyrinth of pipes, valves, and dripping condensation. They move with agonizing slowness, every footstep a potential betrayal. The bilge is forward. To reach it, they must pass directly beneath the crew's quarters. They can hear voices, the clink of a bottle, a burst of laughter. The thin wooden deck above their heads is the only barrier between them and discovery. They reach the forward hold, and there it is, the dark, still water of the bilge, reflecting their trembling light. This is the place. Haukelid opens the toolbox.
Knut Haukelid survived the war, a decorated hero who carried the heavy burden of his actions in silence. The story of Gunnerside and the sinking of the Hydro became a legend of the resistance. But the true, full magnitude of what was achieved in those frozen months of 1943 and 1944 remained shrouded in secrecy for decades. It was not just about blowing up a factory or sinking a ferry. It was a perfect two-act surgical strike on the nervous system of a superweapon. First, Gunnerside proved that the plant itself was vulnerable, shattering the myth of its invincibility and forcing the Germans onto a desperate, risky course of action, the shipment. Second, and with even greater audacity, the Hydro operation exploited that desperation, transforming their solution into their final defeat. It was a masterstroke of asymmetrical warfare, using the enemy's own logistics as the instrument of their destruction. The pocket-sized Thermos bomb at the bottom of Lake Tinshow did more than sink barrels. It sank an entire future. It bought the Allied Manhattan Project the one commodity it needed most: time. Unhindered by the catastrophic loss of their sole source of heavy water, German scientists watched their atomic ambitions dissolve, while across the Atlantic, the relentless work continued. The men of Gunnerside in the Hydro operation did not just sabotage a factory, they altered the trajectory of the 20th century. In the deep, silent dark of a Norwegian lake, alongside the wreck of a ferry, in the memories of those lost, rests the unseen, alternate history that never was, the shadow of a Nazi atomic bomb.